As King Charles celebrates his 77th birthday, the royal family is again under pressure from growing questions over Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to renewed calls for an Australian republic. Joining me live is royal expert Victoria Arbiter. Lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. How is the King marking his birthday? Let's start with that.
Good afternoon to you. Well, the King had a very wet and windy birthday celebration on Friday. He was in South Wales with Queen Camilla, where he began the day by visiting Carmarthen Castle. The castle is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year, so he was presented with a cake in the shape of the castle, and he was treated to a resounding rendition of Happy Birthday. From there, he went on to the South Wales tram depot, where he rode in a tram train. He was in the driver's seat for a short journey, but really what was most striking was how many people braved Storm Claudia to come out and give him homemade cards and gifts. People were shouting happy birthday, and he made sure to stop and greet as many people as possible that had been waiting in the rain, some for well over 3 hours. So a cold, wet and windy birthday for the King, but one spent working, which is how he would have wanted it.
Absolutely, and it's amazing that all of those people still coming out to support him despite the wild weather there. And I mean, it has been a pretty tumultuous few months, to say the least, for the royal family. You've got the Andrew issue, which just seems to be refusing to disappear. How much pressure would that still be putting on the palace behind the scenes?
Well, I think certainly the palace will have been very glad to see that support for the King has remained pretty steady. People overall seem to be very pleased with the fact that he took decisive action. Still, it is becoming increasingly frustrating that there is this steady drip feed of emails that are coming out of the US. Every time it is further bad news for Andrew. Just this week, there were several thousand more emails that came out, and in them, it seemed to validate that photograph, that famous photograph of Andrew pictured with Virginia Jeffrey, as being authentic. For years, Andrew has tried to cast doubt over that particular photograph. There were also emails between him, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein dating back to 2011, in which he seemed to be begging for them to help him clear his name, saying, I quote, I can't take any more of this. He was asking for any legal letters to show that he knew absolutely nothing about Virginia Jeffrey and that he had nothing to do with any of the allegations. So it is a story that simply won't go away. But at this point, the King really has done everything that he can do without there being a formal investigation into the former prince.
And I mean, it's important not to speculate, but do you foresee the Andrew scandal worsening, that new information will be revealed?
Well, we simply don't know what's in those files, and I think that's why everyone's so eager for them to be revealed. But I also think the more we talk about Andrew, it is becoming increasingly important that we talk about everybody else that was involved. While, yes, Andrew certainly will have witnessed things, he may well have taken part. We don't know. They're just allegations. He's never been investigated. But who else was involved? Jeffrey Epstein had a huge staff. He had a vast network of people that he was working with that were coming to his house for dinners, for meetings. Who else was involved beyond the former Prince Andrew? And so I think, while, yes, the palace certainly will be very anxious about anything else that could potentially come out, the fact that the Metropolitan Police in London has said there simply isn't enough evidence for them to investigate Andrew is perhaps giving them an element of relief. But until we know what's in those files, it's impossible to say how much deeper this could go.
That's the big question now, isn't it? Are these calls for, or renewed calls for, all of the files to be released? Victoria, I want to get your thoughts on this. This happened during the week, and I mean, I'm always a bit iffy about polls, but if polls are anything to go by, it suggested that we're seeing a bit of a shift in sentiment here in Australia. How closely is the palace watching the renewed Republican conversation?
Well, I'm very much with you in terms of polls and how reliable they are, because typically they reflect whatever is happening in the news cycle at any given time. So the numbers this week said that around 43% of Australians are in favour of ditching the monarchy. And that got a lot of coverage because back in September, that number was hovering around 38%. But if we look at 25 years ago, the number was 45%. So it really is very difficult to put a lot of stock in these polls. There is no question that Andrew has contributed to the damage. And yet, when you look alongside those polls results, it's also showing that favourability for the king has increased because people are so pleased with the decisive action that he took. So I think Buckingham Palace is always paying attention, but it is important to note as well that King Charles, like his late mother, was always of the opinion that it is the will of the people. And if indeed Australians decide that they do want an Australian head of state, he will support that. It is not his place to go against that. But that is up to the government. And at the moment, certainly Anthony Albanese is saying that taxpayer dollars here should be going towards far more pressing issues, and that certainly while he's Prime Minister, he will not be exploring a referendum.
I think it's a long way away. Victoria, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.